Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm DW Hits here with Fedowar Press. I'm here with Aaron E. Lee, who is a writer, and we're going to talk today about his work and his process. And Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as an author?
Yes, I'm Aaron E. Lee. I've been writing for almost as long as I can remember now. Seriously started writing in high school. I primarily write horror and science fiction short stories, but I like to branch out and write fantasy or sometimes even like nonfiction or comedy. Just whatever gets me going, and just I like to keep writing. um, Sometimes I'll get like stuck, and just choosing a different genre, something as easy as that, will keep me writing.
Hmm.
Um, for me, writing is really a hobby more than a job. I have a full-time job, so like I like to present myself to people who are like, I want to be a writer, but is that really feasible? And I would definitely say, yeah, you just have to know what you want out of it, and go at your own pace. Um, I don't know. I've always worked and then done my writing on the side, and I try to write like the things that I enjoy reading. Um, I don't know. It's just not been about the money for me. I
Hmm.
definitely make a little bit of money off of it, and I feel like it's possible to go in that direction if that's what you have your heart set on. But like I said, for me, it's more of a hobby, and I want to inspire people through my writing. I want to get my name out there, but I'm not like nose to the grinder. I don't force myself to write every day if I don't want. Um, I just like to make it um, more, you know, casual, I guess, and not as much stress. Uh, how do you feel about like writing every single day? Do you?
Oh, I think we. Oh, there you go. We lost you for just a second, but I got you back. You hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, I think, like you said, and I like what you said about how, we have different, we can all have different styles, right? So different aims. Where are we trying to get to? And, where do we want to be right now? Um, Personally, for myself, I love writing every day because it's or if not writing, doing something writing related. Some days it's editing, some days it's revising, some days it's
Hmm.
drafting, whatever it is. But because there's something in me that kind of nags at me if I'm not doing it. I feel like there's a thing that itches in the back of my head, and it's like, you got this story over there. Shouldn't you be doing something with this story? Shouldn't you be moving this edit along? Um, so for me, it's kind of a comfort to complete, uh, getting a little bit of that work done and then having it complete. And then it's like, okay, now I can relax a little bit for the day and, and move on. But I think that everybody has to choose their own path where that's concerned, and coming down to kind of like you were saying, like it depends on what you want out of it. And if you just want to write for the love of writing, you can do that. If you want to publish short stories, then do that. If you want to write novels, then do that. If you want to, only write when the moon is blue, do that. I think it goes back to some of the rules that people try to push on authors. And there's so many rules out there that people want to push on you. And I think we have to decide for ourselves when it comes to that, what we want our prose to sound like. What do we want our method to sound like? What do we want our target to be? And we kind of take it from there.
Exactly. So like I really started with short stories in my writing, and I think it came down in high school. I was taking a writing course, and we had a contest between the two high schools in town, and there was a short story was um, one of the ways you could enter. And so I
Hmm.
wrote a short story. I really wanted to tell a story about a card game, and but it's a card game might just be a card game to some people, but I really wanted to blow it up and make it really important somehow, like really like life and death. Um, I've watched a bunch of like Twilight Zone episodes, and I feel like there might have been an episode or two with similar kind of themes. And I just like the idea of taking something mundane and then turning it into something like magical or powerful. And so I spent a long time trying to figure out the rules to this magical card game that I was going to have my characters play. And I just frustrated myself with the technical aspects of this fictional card game. And the deadline was approaching, and so I was just like, you know what? Forget all the rules. It's the theme that's important. So in my story, which eventually became called Spades, Hearts, Clubs, Diamonds, and Mr. Baines, this guy just is driving along a road and he meets a woman standing in the middle of the road who has a deck of cards, and it's just like a one card draw, so there's no complicated rules to this game. He just has to draw a card, and she says, the card you draw will decide the fate of half of all humanity. So he doesn't even know like exactly what's going to happen. He just knows it's really important, and he has to try and decide, like, how is he going to play this game? How's he going to deal with the situation? What's going on? Is this even real? And I think leaving out all the complicated aspects, that's was like my secret of making a compact short story that still felt like really important and stuff. And that story won first place. Uh, and that's probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because after that, I felt like, I could do this. Like I had a victory early on, and I had fun writing the story. And so I think that's what pushed me into writing, was that first victory there. Uh,
That's fantastic.
yeah, yeah. Um, have you had like a contest win like that, or some kind of victory where you weren't sure if it was going to work out, and then it just like was way better than you thought?
Well, I'm kind of hard headed. The way I've always been is I kind of get something in my mind and I'm like, I should do this. And then I kind of ram my head into the wall until it gets done. Um, so, I mean, my first experience with writing something was probably around, 12 or 14 or something like that. When I think I ended up writing something that was kind of like a short story, and I don't even know why I wrote it, other than I just got a wild hair and just I had to write this story. It was kind of like a cross between Doom and the old movie The Thing, um,
Cool.
and and I'm kind of I found it recently cleaning out the garage, and I'm kind of scared to read it, but. After that, things kind of died down for a little bit, and then later on, when I went to college, I took a English composition class where we were doing creative writing, and the professor there kind of we had a short story assignment, and the professor there kind of gave me a little bit of nudge, and he was like, "You should keep doing this, keep working at it," and that was kind of something that helped made me realize that, what, if other people can just sit down and write a novel, I can do that too. And I
Hmm.
kind of jumped from that class just to writing novels, and I came back to short stories more later on.
That's amazing.
Um, but yeah, it's always nice to get a little nudge and a helping hand from someone. But I kind of, like I said, I get hard headed about things, so just the idea of rediscovering it was enough for me to think I enjoy doing this. I'm just going to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So after high school, I went directly to college. I graduated from OU with a an English major, lit, and I thought it was more important for me to like study literature and like analyze it, and write all the papers, and we did presentations. I had some people ask me like, why didn't I take creative writing as my major? And I just felt like I could practice writing on my own anytime. Um,
Hmm.
but it's a lot harder for me to force myself to like sit down and read a bunch of old books that I would just have to like guess as to which ones I would like or whatever. But I had some really great teachers who presented me with material that I probably would have never chosen for myself, and just exposed me to so much, and like taught us how to analyze it. And in doing that, I feel like I can turn around and write my stories hoping that someday maybe someone will read it with a close eye and
Mhm.
pick up little things. Um, so when I was like in college, I tried submitting some short stories to magazines and whatnot. And back in those days, it was a lot more difficult to find places where you could submit a story and have it read for free. And
Mhm.
everyone wanted money. And so it was like a gamble. I always thought of it as gambling. And so like I did that like, I don't know, a dozen times and I lost all my money. Didn't hit the jackpot there. Uh, so I was like, I'm gonna stop paying money. I'm just gonna focus on, learning what I'm learning in school and kind of go that route. And eventually, self-publishing became a bigger thing with printing directly and doing it all off the internet. Um, I used CreateSpace in the beginning, and I
Mhm.
published my first book of short stories pretty much right out of college. And I was like thinking about doing a novel, but that just seemed like such a daunting task to me. Like, how in the world am I going to get a whole novel out? But I had a few short stories from high school, and I had a few short stories that I'd written during my college classes. And so I was like, if I just write a few more, then I could put together a collection. And around that time is when I was starting to think of like, what do I really want to get out of writing? And for me, it wasn't necessarily the big paycheck. Like I had already proved myself that, gambling and putting your money into something, you're not always going to get money back. But with this
Mhm.
new self-publishing direction, you could put a little bit of money in yourself and you put all the work in, and you might not get sales. That's still a gamble, but you can get a physical book that you can put on your bookshelf and you can be like, I did it. And that's really what I wanted. Is I wanted a bookshelf full of my own work,
Mhm.
to be able to show myself that this is possible. You can put it together, and then hopefully along the way, if you talk to the right people or write the right stories or figure out the marketing thing, then you could make some sales along the way too. And so far that's actually working out pretty well. Do you do a lot of writing for yourself versus writing for sales?
So, um, I would say yes, because I mean, it's always something where I have to write something that I would want to read. There are a couple things that I've written that I'm trying to that I tried to do the whole right to market thing,
Hmm.
and that doesn't necessarily mean that it worked. But it was one of those things where you try to find a happy medium where you're like, this market exists and I enjoy this. So let me try writing something like that or that fits within these boundaries. And that's kind of what my Vampire Hunter series was about, or how that one got started. Now, once it gets started, then it kind of goes down the rabbit hole of where my pantser brain takes me.
Hmm.
Because I start off with, I need A, B, and C to happen. And beyond that, I don't know what's going to happen in this book. But that kind of goes back to, I mean, we were talking about how writing a novel can be a daunting task. And that's where I kind of learned a lot with my first novel, because back then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to plot this thing. And that was the only book I've ever plotted, because number one, it gave me the lessons I needed to figure out to get from A to Z. But at the same time, it taught me that I hate plotting. So I haven't tried it again. Um, but um, since then, it's like that. It's like that. Yeah, I get an idea in my head, and I'm like, this is something that I want to write, whether or not anybody else really finds it interesting. But I also got to think that there's got to be other people like me who find similar things interesting, who want to read similar things to me. So um, yeah, I don't really necessarily write figuring this was the one. This is going to be the one that sells. Um, but
Hmm.
you never know.
Yeah, sometimes it seems like a surprise when you find like something you wrote that resonates more than you would assume with other people, or less, I guess. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really glad you brought up like plotting and pantsing. I'm definitely a pantser. Like, plotting is just another one of the things that, yeah, it's really difficult for me. But I have sort of learned to find a place for it. When I have writer's block, and I know all writers experience it. Sometimes, since I'm so used to pantsing it, then if I have writer's block, I can turn to plotting, and it kind of helps me out. Um,
Mhm.
I've found like plot graphs. I didn't use those for a long time, and now that I've kind of discovered them, I can take if I have a story that's like partially written, which I have a lot of those. I write down a lot of my story ideas and
Mhm.
early like brainstorming without very much editing, but I can compare that to like a plot graph, and that will like inspire me of how to continue the story, how to edit the story, where it needs fixing. Just because there's certain patterns in plot structure that people who do plot, they know the way that a lot of good stories flow a certain way. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean you have to write that way, but like I said, when I get stuck, I find that it
Mhm.
does help me out. Um, I've also had a couple other like epiphanies along the way. Um, when I'm writing my story ideas, sometimes I'll take two completely different story ideas and mash them together, and that will result in a really great story that I wasn't planning on from the beginning. They
Mhm.
had no business being together, but it just works out. And it's like they
Yeah.
were two good stories, and you put them together, and it's like they're more than the sum of their parts. That just happens. I had one really interesting experience with a short story, and I knew I had like a feeling of what the story was going to be. I wanted it to be like a corporate experience where there's like this mysterious company and something is going on behind the scenes, but you don't know what. And I was like, but who's my characters and where does the plot go in this? And somewhere just like out of nowhere almost, I started coming up with quotes that I knew had to be in the story. And I was like, I don't know, these quotes are great. Like if I were thinking of like a movie or a book that had great quotes, like I need some really good one-liners. And so I wrote like 30 or 40 quotes on a page, and then I was like, okay, I have all these quotes, and then I started rearranging them into what seemed like a story that made sense. And then I filled in the gaps with the missing story, and basically the quotes, certain quotes felt more like dialogue and some didn't. So the quotes that were dialogue became my main character. I was like, this has to be the character who's speaking.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I was able to build a story based off of these quotes. I thought that was really interesting. I've never heard of
Yeah,
anyone
that's really
else
cool.
doing that before. Um, but yeah, I think if you get writer's block, just coming up with creative stuff like that really helps a lot. I have a file that's just a list of titles, and it's like I don't know what any of these stories are going to be about, but I think these are cool titles. And so sometimes if I have writer's block, I can just go to that and be like, well, let's just start with the title and see where it goes. Let's see. I think so. After my first book, it was like 10 short stories. Then I was like, yeah, that was really fun, and I want to do it again. The first book felt a lot like the Twilight Zone episodes that I was talking about, and at the time I had been reading like so much Stephen King. I was like, I really want to write something that's darker and a little bit less science fiction, just more horrific. No pulling punches, nothing like that.
Mhm.
So my second book, um, I decided to make it longer, so it's 13 stories instead of 10, and it is definitely darker. The second one's called the Wanton Interim, and I don't know if I remember to say the first book, but my first book was called Hallucinations. So the Wanton Interim, which was my second collection, definitely longer, and I still had a couple leftover short stories from high school days I hadn't used, and I like touched them up, made them, just scarier and everything. Um, and I had a lot more confidence the second time around, and I'm sure that's how it is with everything. You've done it
Mhm.
once, and now you know what you're getting yourself into. And I think both of those books took me about a year to put together. and I was really proud of both of those. Um, One thing I did kind of early on was I went to a writing conference. Uh, Came to Oklahoma City, and I think at the time I was living in Norman, so I had to like drive to the city to go to this big conference, and it was at a hotel, and it was going to be a 2-day event, and all these people were there that I had no idea who anyone was. But it was a really great experience. I took my 2 books with me and heard a bunch of people talk about different writing. And anyone who's interested in writing, that's definitely something you should go to. Like, even if you haven't written a book yet, like, they had so much good advice on what to do, what not to do. Um, yeah, definitely. I wasn't expecting it to help me as much as it did. Like, I had literally just gone to school for 4 years, and I was like, oh, I know everything I need to know, but you never know everything you need to know. You're just always going to be learning, and getting to like meet people
Hmm.
is one of the best ways. Just talking to people who have done it. Um, I don't know. Have you spoken with anyone who was like a writer that you kind of revered or learned something from?
I have not had the chance to do that yet, and I look forward to it. Where I am in Montana, there's not a ton of conferences that come anywhere near here, and it's been on my list since I've been so heavily into working and writing in the past couple of years, and then COVID hit and everything shut down. So I'm keeping my eyes open for things coming up in the next year or so to try and hopefully I can go and attend something. But that sounds like a fantastic story. I can definitely see coming out of college where you think you know everything coming out of college until you find out you don't.
Hmm.
And that I can. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, it was definitely fun. Um, So after my second book, I really wanted to change it up, and I wanted to do a collection that was just different than everything else I had done. And I had been writing some short stories that were comedies, and like I've just got one of those senses of humor where um, almost everything makes me laugh. I watch like a lot of Mel Brooks movies, a lot
Mm,
of parodies, a lot of like old like the Three Stooges or the Marx Brothers. I'm kind of up for anything when it comes to comedy, and I had a few short stories already that it just made me laugh to write them. And I was like, if it makes me laugh, then maybe it'll make someone else laugh. And I feel like that's the same thing with the way I write horror. Is I write something that scares me, and then my hope is to find other people that thinks it's the same thing as scary. And so I think
mm,
comedy and horror kind of go hand in hand that way. It's like, not everyone's going to be scared of the same thing. Not everyone's going to
mm,
find the same stuff funny, but you just kind of, do your best. And like with collections of short stories, that really gives you a wide range of, doing a lot of different things within one collection. So with all my short stories, there's, science fiction, there's thriller, there's suspense, mystery. And in my comedy collection, it's just a mix of parody and satire, a lot of dark humor. There's a fantasy story that's just really funny. So I just like to mix it up. And that third collection that I wrote was so much fun for me because I was like just trying to make myself laugh as hard as I could. And if I could make myself laugh,
uh-oh. I think we might have lost Aaron. We give him just a second to see if he can reconnect here.
you got
There you go. Looks we lost you for just a second.
okay. So yeah, I've got those 3 books were like my biggest projects in the beginning. And then I wrote 3 books, or I didn't write, sorry. I put together 3 books for family members. It was more editing and formatting in those projects, and those are like never going to be published. It was purely as like a gift. But
Mhm.
like anything you can do that just keeps you in practice and build your skills, I recommend, heading down every road that's something new, even if it's something you've never tried before. um, yeah, you just never know where you're going to pick up like a new skill or a new like a new love of some component. um, on all my books, like I design my own covers, and a lot of people think that doesn't result in as good of covers as professionals. And my response is like, yeah, it's might not be as good. I guess it's kind of subjective. Art is subjective.
Mm,
But I've always loved art as much as I loved writing, and I want to practice those skills just as much as my writing skills.
mm.
Do you
So,
do any art, or is it purely writing?
Um, I've never been too good at visual art. I've done some graphic design here and there, and I do a lot of the technical end when it comes to graphic design and getting things done for the press and those sorts of things. But as far as purely creative artwork, I'm not necessarily in that realm. I've done music for a chunk of my past and worked in that for a bit, and even worked as audio engineer for a while, which was a lot of fun, recording other people's music and getting that stuff down, and that was a really enjoyable time in my life. So I've always enjoyed the arts. It's kind of like a family thing. My grandmother pushed me initially to get involved in the arts when I was very little, and
Hmm.
while I wasn't very good at it, she was very kind and kind of encouraged me to continue working in areas where I could be more successful. Uh, but why don't we move on to because we're getting a little into our time here. Why don't you tell me about Heat Wave, your story that you have inside the Remnants, which there's a link to this in the description down below. And everybody should check out that book and check out Heat Wave. Why don't you tell us what was your inspiration for Heat Wave and kind of give us a little bit about that plot?
Okay, great. So Heat Wave is one of those stories that I had some difficulties figuring out at the beginning, and so I took two stories that were unrelated and smashed them together. Before I even had heard of Remnants, I was working on a story that was like I wanted it to be about someone on the internet, and at the time I was thinking about basing the story on a Twitter experience or some sort of social media experience, and I wanted you to be able to like read it and follow like the social interactions online.
Mm-hmm.
But hadn't gotten very far on that. Um, so then I started looking up different news articles, and I had like this nonfiction project where I was just like looking up all the horrific things going around the world. There's wildfires and shootings, and I think they had some cruise liners tip over. um, there was there's always crazy stuff going on, and like I was copying these news stories from different places around the internet, and I was writing down like or keeping track of like how many casualties there were, how many survivors there were, and I was like, I need to use this information somehow. It's going to fuel a story somehow. This is like big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is worldwide. And then Remnants came along, and I love the idea of everyone being able to play in the sandbox. And there's this great alien invasion story, and it was like these worldwide destruction, and I started seeing these elements come together in my mind, and I was like, you know what, this is going to be perfect for what I need. um, Remnants gave us the ability to put our stories at the beginning, middle, or end. That was a wonderful freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not imagine figuring out how to write a story for the end of Remnants. That was really tough for me. It hadn't been written yet. It was just sort of an outline. And I was like, you know what? If I'm going to write a story in someone else's world, then I'm going to put mine near the beginning of the timeline so that I don't have to worry about everyone else's story. I didn't want like my story to contradict other people's.
Mm-hmm.
So if you write at the beginning of the timeline, then whatever I wrote wouldn't have to be based on what other people had written, and people who wrote after me, they could figure out like how they wanted their stories to go, and it wouldn't have to interfere with my story. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and as I read them all, like I just felt like it made sense. So I took these two ideas and I kind of went away from like the social platform of Twitter, but I created my character as just a researcher, as I had felt like I had been doing. And he researches all the traumatic events in the world and all the things going on. And in his research, he discovers there is an alien invasion happening. And so, like, another big thing in my writing is I have a real struggle with like writing the point of view of a military perspective or like the police or governments. And I was like, they have to be involved, but at the same time, I just don't have the warehouse knowledge for that. So how do you do that? So my main character, he doesn't know anything about the military or anything. He's just a guy who's doing research on the internet, and he stumbles upon what's happening overseas. And so in that way, I felt like I was more free to talk about this story in a way that I didn't have to include all like the military protocols. So
Mm-hmm.
I can show whenever I imagined the alien invasion happening, and when I wrote the scenes of the actual the swarm coming in, um, for those scenes, I pictured like what would I want to see on a movie screen, because I still want to feel like an audience member witnessing the destruction that's happening. So instead of putting the military people into like the main point of view, it's more like you're watching them and you're watching the story unfold in front of you. And I tried to make some really dramatic scenes of, I think I have like the army standing on a hillside, and then the swarm approaches, and it just clouds the sky, and they realize that this is not just like a swarm of locusts or something. This is definitely something else. And
Mm-hmm.
they swarm over and they take over this small town, and the military guys kind of hunker down into like a garage area. And I think for that scene, I was really inspired by the movie The Mist. There's a scene where they're in the back, and there's like the monsters are pounding on the garage door, and so I
Mm-hmm.
kind of was imagining the same scenario. And I think my biggest complaint about that movie was, at least that section of the movie, is I couldn't understand why people were still in the front part of the store where the big windows were. And so in my story, I was like, they have to get out of the store. They need to stay in the garage where they're safe, get in the car where there's the most protection. And I have like some technological reasoning how they can like talk to the main character who's doing all this research. And so he kind of learns about all the horrors they're undergoing. And just from like, he feels like safe, right? He's just on like the computer, and he's hearing about this catastrophe happening, and they tell their story, and then he's like, oh my gosh, well, what can I do about this? So the story just sort of unfolds from there. Now he has to be the one to like uh, is the United States going to like accept what's going on, or is there like a
Mm-hmm.
big cover up? And so the story kind of jumps from there. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but that's really how I got inspired to write that story, was putting the other two ideas together.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Heat Wave, and like I mentioned before, the link for that is down below in the description, and I hope you guys go and check it out. Um, so tell me, what are you working on right now?
Okay, so right now I am like between a lot of projects. I just submitted a short story that was a camp slasher. Hopefully I'll
Mhm.
be hearing about that soon. And good or bad, it is what it is. But it was a lot of fun to write, I will tell you that. I have a story I have a couple stories that are sequels to the short stories I've already published. So that my first sequel is a story called Shadow Vexers, and in the first story, which I believe is in my book, The Wanton Interim, which is my second collection, the Shadow Vexers are a group of teenagers that are like ghost hunters, and when they encounter a ghost, they vex it or they agitate it. And when they do this, they make the ghost weak and they absorb the ghost's power. And so they're kind of like, exorcists or ghost hunters or whatever. And there's this interesting gimmick of every time they eliminate a ghost or they make a ghost less powerful, they actually absorb those powers for themselves so they can get powers from them. So I'm writing a sequel to that, and I'm expanding the world. In the first story, it was like a single team, and it was like 5 or 6 different kids, and they were introducing. There's like a newbie just joining the team, so they were telling that person, all the world of how the world really works and what these ghosts do and how they operate. And in part two, I'm going to introduce the idea that there's multiple teams around the country that operate the same way. So I'm revealing that it's not just, one team in one town, but shadow vexes are actually everywhere. And these teams are going to be drawn into a single town that's been vacated, and it's like a ghost town. And they're going to be doing some investigation there, like, who or what has caused this entire town to be uh, just void of all life.
Hmm.
Um, I got this idea partly from someone on Twitter who said that I should write a young adult western. So I'm gonna try and make it into like a modern day western story where there's these kids in a ghost town, and we'll see what happens. Um, Another story that I'm writing is also a sequel. I have a story in my comical collection called Hell to Pay. And in that one, there's a guy that goes to hell and he realizes he's the first person in all of the world to ever go to hell. So he's the only one there. And it's like this huge place, and Satan's there and a couple demons. And he's just dumbfounded that he's the first person to ever go to hell. And it was so much fun to write. I have a sequel to that already written but unpublished, and the sequel, part two, focuses on his wife and what she does when she realizes her husband has died and gone to hell. And so I'm currently writing the third installment, and I'm not sure. This is like kind of a future project. I don't know when it'll come out, but in the third installment, I'm going to include not only hell but the heaven realm as well. I had this bizarre dream about going to heaven, and it is not what you expected. It is um, a desolate place, and there's like that. The roads might be paved with gold, but people are not happy there. And so I was like, that is just spot on for this comical world that I've been showing. It's like, if hell wasn't what you expected it to be, then why should heaven be what you expect it to be? So the third installment is going to talk about that. Um, I have my first novel. I'm proud to say it's done, and I have been working on that for over 5 years. It's probably over 7 years now. Long time. I took a bunch of short stories and started stringing them together to make my way to my first novel. It's a science fiction story. It's going to be called Star Song. It's different. So the main character is a being who is a celestial. And in this world, the celestials are what we would think of as stars and black holes and other celestial objects, but they're actual characters, and they can have voices and they can talk and think. And so my celestial has recently passed away, and in his ghost state, he is like an observer of the universe, and he can go anywhere and observe anyone, and he can't participate. So he's the narrator of the story, and he's observing everything that happens. And he comes across a solar system, or a star, or a celestial, if you would, and it's orbiting bodies. And on two of these planets, there are very different uh, beings that inhabit the worlds, and they don't know about each other yet, but they're about to. So this story is really about first contact between these two civilizations, and my main character is like really excited to see what's going to happen. And then of course there's going to be some danger involved. Uh, what happens if they get together and uh, things don't go quite as well as they planned.
Mhm.
There's he plays around with fate. He can travel through time, and if he screws something up, then there's going to be some big problems. But that story has been a very long process for me, and I think I'm to the point now where I can call it done, and I have been submitting it a couple different places. I haven't got any acceptances yet, and I'm fully willing to self-publish if need be. It's just a story that I love, and I hope that it gets told one way or another. Um,
Mhm.
so I have two more big projects that I'm working on right now. I've got a fourth collection of shorts ready to go. My biggest thing about like why I haven't done it myself yet is I'm still having a lot of fun submitting these stories to other places. So I'm not sure exactly which stories are going to go in this collection because I've got a handful that I might just want someone else to publish if I can get them to publish it, or I might just publish it myself. So um,
Mhm.
that one is going to be called Ruminations, which is kind of a play off of hallucinations. So it's more horror stories. I had a lot of true crime influence for this newest collection, so that's pretty good. And then my last big project that I'm working on right now is another edition of Hallucinations, my first book. This one is going to be an audio version. I found someone who's willing to help me turn this into an audiobook, and we have talked a bit about like how it's going to be done, and I'm hoping that it will be done this year. That's our main goal, is to get it done this year, and he's going to
Mhm.
narrate it. I think pretty sure he's going to be the one and only narrator. I've heard like his work, and he's showed me some examples. I'm really excited to get him on board, and it sounds like he has a lot of the same tastes that I do, so I think he's going to enjoy reading these stories. And I just really hope it turns into an audiobook, because I've enjoyed a lot of audiobooks recently myself. I think that along with, ebooks and audiobooks are definitely a thing of the future. We need to push those as hard as we can. However people absorb their stories, doesn't matter if you're
Mhm.
actually reading it. If you're listening to an audiobook, that's reading too. And like all the audiobooks I've listened to are just so good, and you get something out of those that you can't get from just reading it. And there's benefits and negatives to both, I suppose. But I have my print book, so audio is the next step, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, audio is fantastic. I mean, I know because of my schedule, I don't have nearly as much time to read print books as I would like to, but I can easily fit in audiobooks into my schedule. And it means that I can always listen to something on the way to work. I can listen to something while I'm working and typing away. I can listen to things while I'm, playing a video game with the kids. It's like there's a whole nother way to bring in stories. And for me, the way I absorb stories is almost like I'm listening to a voice anyway. So it's like, uh, it's like the same thing to me.
Hmm.
I know some people don't feel that way. Like they don't absorb the material the same way if they're reading versus listening. But I love it. In a lot of ways, I think it's the wave of the future if to continue going that way. So. So
Definitely.
tell me about what exciting things you have coming up in your future.
So I've got some personal things in my future that I'm excited for. Um, my job is always changing, so I'm hoping to get some new like responsibilities, and do something different there. I work in payroll,
Mm,
and just this last year we had a huge uh, automation update. We got some new technology that helped us with our job, and we saved a lot of man hours. And it was just it blew my mind. Usually, like the last couple months of the year is busy, but my job provided us with this, you know, gift, really, where we didn't have to do.
Uh-oh. Like we lost him one more time. Let's get Aaron just a minute and see if he can reconnect. Oh, there we go.
And kick me off again. Okay. So yeah, I'm really excited for what's going on in my work life. Um, as far as writing, I plan on continuing to submit
Mm,
short stories, and I'm always writing more. And it's just like who knows what's coming up. I believe there's a writers conference on Friday that I'm trying to attend. It's an online writers conference, and I wish I had the name here in front of me, but I can't remember what it's called. Um, but yeah, and I just encourage people to do those kinds of things. Put yourself out there. Um, you know, get resources wherever you can find them. Get practice wherever you can do it. Uh, write, write your dreams down. Do
mm.
journaling. I do a lot of journaling. Um, and you can make a writing career in the way that you see fit. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be an everyday thing. It doesn't have to be paying the bills. It doesn't have to be stressful. uh, it's whatever you want it to be. If you want to make money off of it, I'm sure there's a way to do that too. um, yeah.
Fantastic. So tell us again, give us a rundown one more time of your other works that you have for sale. And I'll remind the viewers that we have all of Aaron's information in the description down below, along with links to his Twitter and to his blog. And you mentioned before that everything, all of your works are linked to from your blog, so our viewers can find them from there, correct?
Yeah, on my blog, there's a button, I believe it's near the top, and it says where to find them. And that's a button of a link of where to find all of my links, all the Amazon links, all the
Mm,
other links that I have. So right now, I've got these 3 printed books out. I've got Hallucinations, it has a black cover there with a sunset. I've got Wanton Interim, it's kind of a checkered color. It's got an hourglass on the front, and the Cryogenic Conundrum. That's the blue book, and I have a couple of stories that you can actually access online for free if you check out the Not Ready for Rhyme Time podcasts on Castbox. They've got a few of my works on their podcast. That was one of the first places that accepted my work, and I was really excited. If you go
nice.
to Orca's Lantern, they have a blog with a lot of free flash fiction, and I have a short story on there as well. It's called The Memory Within. So if you like science fiction, yeah, I believe speculative fiction is what they're referring to it there. And I've enjoyed a lot of their stories there as well. And then just this year, I got a couple more stories out. One is at Noctivagant Press. That's Noctivagant press.co.uk. They have a free online magazine, and so they accepted one of my short stories for their online magazine, and they just started selling hard copies.
Mm,
So that's a really great place. You can go, you can read. If you like it, then you can buy it. If you just want to read it and enjoy it online, that's something you can do too. And I think my newest short story that's out was published in a book called 206 Word Stories by Bag of Bones Press. And we had 206 authors, 206 short stories, 206 for the number of bones in the body, and each story was exactly 206 words. So I got a short story published in there, and they are donating all their profits to children's charities. So I highly encourage people to go check that one out. Um, Even though it was 206 stories, it took me like a week to read the whole thing because they're short. And
mhm.
there was, I don't know, several dozen that I thoroughly enjoyed, and it was just great examples of what you can do in horror and compacting it into such a short format like that.
Hmm. That sounds really neat. That's a neat concept. And I mean, 206 words. I mean, I think as far as like a print layout, I mean that's a page of a story,
Hmm.
which is neat. If you think about how much of a story you can tell within one page and condensing it to get across your point and your concept in such a short space, that takes talent.
Oh yeah.
So that's very neat. So like I mentioned before, Aaron's information is in the description below. I encourage everyone to click the link and go follow him on Twitter, so you can hear about all of his upcoming releases, all of his daily tweets, and get to know Aaron, as well as go check out his blog and check out those links to his publications. Aaron, I want to say thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you as well.
Definitely, I had a lot of fun. And good night, everybody out there, and have a wonderful evening.